the language of the ordinance, and a great deal of this ordinance is from that language. And there is additional stuff in it that's very well written. I think it's very clear, and I'm impressed by how terrific that was. So good for you to do that. So Lehigh County passed its Human Relations Ordinance into law in February 2024. Human Relations Ordinances establish non-discrimination protections for people in a local community that go beyond state and federal discrimination protections. The language in the Lehigh County Human Relations Ordinance has been vetted. It conforms to state and federal requirements. This is not DEI. This is law. So the Human Relations Commission, there is a state Human Relations Ordinance, and it was originally passed in 1955. And in section 12.2, it specifically allows any political subdivision, so that's cities, towns, school districts, boroughs, townships, anything that is a political subdivision, to create its own Human Relations Ordinance and its own commission. In 2002, Allentown added sexual orientation and gender identity to its Human Relations Ordinance 23 years ago. And at that time, an anti-LGBT group challenged the addition because it went beyond the classes that were in Pennsylvania state law, the protected classes. But in 2005, the Commonwealth Court, the appellate court, found that Allentown's ordinance was fully supported by the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, and it upheld that any municipality that wants to pass an anti-discrimination law may do so and can have any protected classes that the local government sees fit. And there's other case laws that supports that as well. So in the state of Pennsylvania, there are 78 municipalities, here they are, that have human relations laws. They are all in place now. These are the ones that have passed. I particularly work for the LGBT community, so these are the ones that were the original passage of sexual orientation in Philadelphia in 1982, and the first passage of gender identity in Allentown in 2002. But all of these ordinances have lists of protected classes. On the other hand, we can't wait for the state to pass additional protected classes that are not in state law, because Pennsylvania hasn't legislatively passed a new protected class into the state human relations law since 1991. Human relations ordinances do two things. The first thing it does is it makes discrimination and bias illegal in a variety of areas by defining what discrimination is and naming the circumstances in which it's banned. And the second thing it does is it creates a Human Relations Commission of volunteer commissioners to implement the law. But the important thing is the language of the law itself. Regardless of whether there is a commission, the law itself makes things that are discrimination illegal. So you have to think about it as a stop sign. You stop at the stop sign because it's illegal to drive through. Whether there's a police officer there or not, you stop because it is the law. Without a stop sign, you don't have to stop, and the Human Relations Ordinance is like a stop sign that makes it illegal to discriminate. So Human Relations Ordinances, in order to legally protect against unfair discrimination, they have to enumerate protected classes. You can't just say, we're not going to discriminate against anybody, in the same way that you can't have laws that say, well, we're just not going to have anybody break the laws. We have to write the laws, and you have to explain what they mean so that people know what that means. Protected classes in the Human Relations Ordinance, in your written ordinance, so this piece of legislation, it has these protected classes, and they're very standard protected classes that you see in most human relations ordinances. And the little squares there indicate that they're in federal and state law as well. So race, color, sex, ancestry, religion, veteran status, having a GED rather than a high school diploma, getting a genetic information, retaliation for filing, all of those things are in sort of standard non-discrimination laws. But this ordinance also includes these protected classes, and you would think that these would be protected, and they should be protected, and they're in the information that comes out, this legislation that we're talking about now. So it includes marital status, it has family status, that is in state and federal law and housing, but this also extends it to employment and public accommodation. Age over 35, in state and federal law it's 40. Pregnancy, that includes breastfeeding and related medical conditions. Physical or mental disability includes some additional physical disabilities, including long COVID, which is not in state or federal law. It has gender identity and sexual orientation and gender expression. It has height and weight, which was just recently passed in New York City and has been the law of the land in Michigan for many years. And it includes domestic or sexual violence victim status, and it also has the unique protected classes of intersex and non-binary, and I'll explain what those are in a minute. The big difference, and you'll be interested to hear that the big difference is the definition of employer. So in state law, and this is important because definitions are key, in state law, it says that it defines employer as any person or organization who employs 4 or more people, not including the employer's spouse or parents or children. So that means if you work for a business where they have a bunch of family members and then they have 3 employees, you are not protected by non-discrimination law at all. You could be fired because of race, you could be fired because of age, you could be fired because of religion, and you're not protected. And in federal law, there has to be 15 employees. So if there's less than 15 employees, you're not protected by federal law. Your ordinance, however, the way it's written, indicates that an employer, in the definition section, an employer is any person or organization employing 1 or more persons, regardless of, and not including the employer's family. And it's important to note that in the Lehigh Valley, where I live in Allentown, the Chamber of Commerce there has indicated that 51% of businesses have less than 5 employees. So if you look at that, with regard to federal coverage here in Collingdale, half of the businesses where you would work, you would not be covered under the EEOC, under the federal law. And you wouldn't be covered in state law. About a third of people wouldn't be covered by state law. But your law would protect that. The intention of this ordinance is to prevent bias and discrimination based on protected class unrelated to the employee's ability to do the job. The ordinance does not require employers to hire someone not qualified to do a job and not legally authorized to work. And in fact, it says specifically, nothing in this ordinance shall require a person to break existing U.S., PA state, or municipal law. Definitions are really important, and you have in the law, and you can read the ordinance, and I know all of you have received the ordinance, the circumstances of the definitions are very, very clear. And so I did say that I would mention that intersex is a special class in your law, and it includes a person born with reproductive or sexual anatomy or chromosomal patterns that do not fit typical definitions of male or female. Intersex status is a protected class under this ordinance regardless of surgical or medical history. And non-binary, which is also one of your unique protected classes, is a person whose gender identity does not fit within the traditional categories of male or female and may include identities such as agender, bigender, gender fluid, or other self-determined terms, meaning that you get to determine what gender you are. You don't get the government to tell you who you are, or your parents, or a doctor. You determine what your gender is. Protections here cover all, so this law protects people in all healthcare providers, all educational institutions. It protects people from discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodation. Public accommodation is kind of everything else, whether you go to a restaurant or whether you get public transit or whether you go to a hotel. All of those things are public accommodation. Employers may not inquire about prior convictions before the first interview. An employer may not deny employment based on non-relevant convictions. That is state law. So that is actually already state law. It's just reminding people and employers in Collingdale that they cannot deny employment in that way. Also, you cannot ask about a person's prior salary history based on this law. And this is a really important thing because 20 U.S. states, including Alabama, but not Pennsylvania, have passed a salary history bans. Salary history bans rapidly close pay gaps experienced by women and people of color. In other words, you can't say, well, what were you making before? Hey, we're going to give you a little bit more than that. And it turns out that everybody else is making way more than that. This also prohibits retaliation against any individual for asserting their rights, making a claim of discrimination. It prohibits discrimination based on hair texture and hairstyles. It prohibits algorithms and automated decision-making tools or other technologies that result in disparate treatment based on protected class. It prohibits use of digital platform, smartphone application, or internet access as a condition of receiving services or participating in borough-funded programs here in Collingdale unless an alternative, accessible method is also provided. And it prohibits any public-facing business, service provider, or government entity to refuse to take cash payments for goods, services, rent, or access to healthcare or education. It also says that it'll be unlawful for any healthcare provider or educational institution to deny care, enrollment, accommodations, or equal opportunities on the basis of protected class status, including the refusal to provide gender-affirming care, culturally competent education services, or trauma-informed accommodations for survivors of violence. Oh, wait a minute, let's go back here. This is the religious exemption. This follows the religious exemption that is in state laws, Pennsylvania State Religious Freedom Protection. In effect, it indicates that churches, synagogues, other religious entities, and fraternal organizations with a religious mission are exempt from this law. In other words, if you are in a Catholic church and you're going to hire somebody to be the next priest, and you say it has to be a man and it has to be Catholic, that is an exemption because you're allowed to do that, because it's part of the mission of the Catholic Church. People who feel they're discriminated against can file a complaint. For a discrimination complaint to be under the jurisdiction of the Human Relations Commission, somebody has to be able to answer yes to all these three questions. Did it happen here in Collingdale? Did the most recent instance happen in the last 180 days? And is the complaint based on a discrimination regarding a protected class listed in the ordinance? That's called a prima facie case. You're going to say, yes, this happened to me because of my age, and I was discriminated against. You can't just say, I think it might have happened, I don't know what it was. So people have to be able to, the complainant has to be able to name the classes that they were discriminated against. They can have help with that. If the answer is no to any of these questions, it's likely the discrimination complaint is not under your local jurisdiction and can't be handled by your commission. But if the answer is yes to all of those, the complainant can fill out and submit a complaint form, and complainants can request help to fill out the form if they need it. The complaint form is going to have these kinds of pieces of information on it: when, where, what happened, protected class, the discrimination category. And this is the way the Human Relations complaint form looks in Lehigh County. It comes up on the website. It says right there, click here to file a discrimination complaint. And if you click there it says that. If you click there, you can download it onto your computer, fill it out as a fillable PDF, and send it in to this email address, which is the liaison to the county. And then that will be passed on to the Human Relations Commission. And you can, and when people can't do that, they can go into the city hall or the county or here into Borough Hall and fill out a complaint by hand. This is the way this complaint form looks. It has a list of potential protected classes. Sometimes there are instances of discrimination, could be more than one protected class. And this requests the person, or requires the person, to fill out what happened, and at least briefly to say what happened, so that it's clear about what happened to them with regard to discrimination. And then here it indicates what kind of evidence does the person have of the discrimination. And in that circumstance, what it's really doing is telling the complainant to get ready to deal with instances of discrimination by amassing the evidence. The commission then, and this says this in your ordinance, the commission shall appoint an investigator among its commissioners and to gather facts through interviews, could be more than one person, and then the investigator takes that finding to the full commission. If no probable cause is found, probable cause means whether or not there is a cause for discrimination. In other words, if there's no probable cause, the complainant loses. Wait, if there's no probable cause, the complainant wins. That's not right. If there is probable cause for discrimination, the complainant wins. If the case shall be closed, or if there's no probable cause, the complainant, it should say the complainant loses. And the case then is closed. If the probable cause exists, then the complainant wins. In other words, the commission may recommend then any remedy available through the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. Fines issued to the borough, so fines actually are like, that go to the borough, they don't go directly to the complainant. Both sides can appeal in the courts, and they can maintain, the commission has to maintain confidential records of everything that they've done. And the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission doesn't train people how to do this. The Human Relations Commission will not train the commissioners how to investigate. They won't train the commission how to function. They tell you you can do it, and then they say you're on your own. Luckily, I am happy to train the commissioners. I've done that many times. I just finished training the commissioners in Allentown on how to investigate claims, and I'll do it at no cost. It's part of my job. The complainant, so again, the procedures are that the complainant has the burden of proof. So if you bring a complaint against somebody that's discriminating against you, you have the burden of proof. And you have to bring evidence, at least logical indications of evidence of discrimination, and you have to bring that to the commission. So there you go, I have evidence. It's not up to the Human Relations Commission to be detectives without any basis. The legal standard for the determination of fault is by a preponderance of the evidence, and that's the same thing that you would see in People's Court. It's the same thing that you would see in the Court of Common Pleas. What it means is that the complainant has to tip the scale in their favor. But if they can't tip the scale, if it's he said, if it's just everybody comes out even, then the complainant loses because they have the burden of proof. Besides individual complaints, the Human Relations Commission may also work to decrease discrimination in other ways by doing presentations, by holding panels, by suggesting mediation between groups, by having it being present at events, all of those things. The complaints, now here's the important thing to remember, that complaints are rare, particularly in a smaller community like that. When I was on the Allentown Human Relations Commission, and I served that commission for 15 years, we only had 5 prima facie cases. And among those 5 prima facie complaints, only 3 had probable cause. Because remember, it's the law itself that helps to stop discrimination. It tells people to stop discriminating. In fact, even when you are being discriminated against, you can say to an employer or a landlord or a public accommodation situation, what you're doing is against the law. I can file a complaint against you, and many times what happens is that the person stops doing it. Lehigh County, we have 357,000 people in Lehigh County. I am the chair of the Lehigh County Human Relations Commission now, and among that, in the 8 months that we have been functioning, we've had 4 complaints, only 2 have been jurisdictional, and one of them has already been dismissed. We're still working on the other one. How much is this going to cost you? Well, commissioners may act as investigators, and the commissioners are non-paid. They're non-salaried people, so there's no cost there, necessarily cost there. Lehigh County's Human Relations Commission budget line for the big county is $500, and mostly that is meeting the meeting advertising requirements, because we have to advertise in the newspaper. In Allentown, the budget line, and Allentown has had their non-discrimination law since 1964, their budget line is 0, and it has been 0 for many, many years. What you will need is a borough government worker to forward complaint forms to the commission investigators, to post meeting dates and arrange Zoom links, because I suggest that you have the meetings on Zoom publicly, edit minutes and post them. The complaint form should be online, and a good form instruction will help to reduce non-jurisdictional complaints. It'll help to make people understand how they have to make the complaint. Often, when the case is reviewed, the discrimination problem turns out to be a misunderstanding. And in fact, when I was on the Allentown Human Relations Commission, I investigated those claims. All 3 of the ones that were probable cause, the respondent immediately said, Oh, I didn't know that was against the law. I'll stop. And what do I have to do to make the complainant happy? What do I have to do to make it right with the complainant? As soon as possible, they'll say that. Why have this municipal law when there is state and federal law? Well, right in your ordinance it says, whereas in the time of both national uncertainty and local transformation, the Borough Council recognizes the necessity and moral clarity of codifying its anti-discrimination commitments through legislation that is responsive, enforceable, and aspirational. And that's a really great moral point of view to take for your borough. But also on a more practical level, really what that's saying is local commissions ensure a layer of legal protections for the most vulnerable at a time when the federal protections may no longer provide coverage or when state protections can be repealed. And even more significantly, local commissions expedite resolutions of complaints. While complaints can be filed with the state's backlog is 1,700 cases, and all new cases will not even be reviewed for jurisdiction earlier than 3 months. I received a complaint, and the last complaint we received, it got a couple of weeks ago. It was sent to me, the person filed the complaint, it was sent to me directly by the person at Lehigh County building. I read it, I could tell it was not jurisdictional, and I informed the person by the end of the day. They didn't have to wait 3 months to find out that their complaint was not jurisdictional. Federal discrimination cases can take 3 years, and that's how long it would take to resolve. And of course, your law has more protected classes than state and federal law. Your Human Relations Commission meetings should be able to meet online via Zoom or Teams so that other people could be on as well. That makes it much easier for the commissioners to be able to come to the meetings. We had 13 potential openings for Human Relations Commissioners in Lehigh County. We had 22 applications. So we have a full complement of commissioners, and people can come to the meetings on Zoom. I had one person who was, and they do. I mean, we always have a quorum, and we've almost always have almost everybody that comes to the meeting. One person had COVID. They were on the meeting in their jammies, and they voted, they listened, and then they went back to being sick the minute the meeting was over. It'd be nice, wouldn't it be? Commission members may not miss more, what your law says is commission members may not miss more than 3 consecutive meetings or they will be deemed to have resigned. What it actually says is unless they have an excuse. I don't even give them excuse in our law. It says if they miss more than 3 meetings, they're out in a 12-month period because we need people to be there, and they can be there on Zoom. You should have at least 7 human relations commissioners to be able to really adequately adjudicate your law. And anybody have any questions? There you go. What do you think? What do you got?
Thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
Yeah.
So did anybody have any questions for Liz before we bring our next presenter up? Diane?
So is this commission just for the borough itself or all businesses within the borough?
It's for all businesses within the borough. Everybody is covered for everything.
And
In the same way that the state is for everybody.
So your recommendation is to have 7 commissioners?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, actually, my recommendation is to have more, but that's what it was written in your small borough. And truthfully, you're going to have very few complaints. So, yeah.
Are you visiting all communities?
I am happy to visit all communities.
Who brought you here tonight? That's right.
Who brought me? See, Michael Robinson asked me to come, and I said, yes, I would be happy to come down here. I came from Allentown, and it was a remarkably long drive during rush hour. Yes.
And what's the process of picking commissioners? Is there like an election process?
Well, in your ordinance and in most ordinances, people apply, and there's a certain number of slots, so people apply, and then usually, since you have a mayor and borough council, The mayor would appoint the person, and I would presume that you would do it this way, the mayor would appoint the person, and then city council would vote to approve that person. And then they would have a term of 3 years. It's actually, it indicates that, something specific to that. Yes, did you have a question?
So, but we're a borough council, not a city, and the mayor's rights are different. So would that still apply to the borough, that the mayor would be able to do the appointments? Because I haven't seen that happen with any other committees or commissions here.
How is it written in the law?
No, it would be an appointment of the council.
Oh, so it's okay with the council. Okay, it's different. Amazingly, it's different in every single political subdivision in the state. Yeah, so that's what it would be. It would be borough council would do that. People would be recommended, and in the same way that you have other committees like that. Yeah. Anybody else?
Your presentation was very well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to answer any other questions. I'll be here after the meeting, so if you want to ask me direct questions and you're embarrassed about asking them in public, I'm happy to talk to you. Anybody?
Thank you.
From the gang?